Drama bin drama, ole drama, Nyar drama, Said drama, Arab drama zote pamoja. The new political formations taking shape on our local political scene are more than super fascinating. Daggers are drawn, and both the visible and invisible political players are hard at it. And the result are the many dramatic developments we're witnessing on our local political scene. But even as we enjoy our popcorn over this political battle, colossal political battle before us, there are some very scary developments within these battles. What are they? And if it is true this has happened before in our history, what happened? What unfolded then? What do you expect to unfold on the Kenyan scene next? Stay with me on my show today as I unpackage all this, and you'll have all the answers before the end of the show today. That I promise you. And allow me just a quick reminder, Weekly Intelligence Briefings number 87 is out. Has been out for a few days. You need to catch it. It explains the mystery, because our recent presidential elections still remain a mystery. What happened there? What really happened? That's how most Kenyans are taking it. Number 87, and indeed 86 and 85, lay bare exactly what happened. And it is shocking. Anyway, you can see my latest special offer on the screens right now. Take full advantage of it in case you're not yet a subscriber. This special offer was extended to help wipe the tears of grieving Kenyans, of wounded Kenyans. But I'm afraid it now has to come to an end very soon. So please rush and take advantage of it. Right. We have a lot of very hot political potatoes to handle on the show today. So let's get down to it. Twende kazi. The truth about the political situation in Kenya right now is that it is highly toxic. Sample the following. We know, at least most of us should know, that power abhors a vacuum anywhere in the world. And in recent times, power in Kenya has shifted very dramatically. Those who are in the opposition are now in government. And those who are in government are now on the opposing side politically. What do you expect? Now, one thing I'm sure many Kenyans have already noticed is this thing of forgetting that the situation has changed. You're so used to doing things in a certain way that when your situation changes, you still can't get it. The perfect example of this is, of course, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. In my opinion, and in the opinion of many, our deputy president is still positioned in the opposition. Our deputy president is still heckling. Because when you're the second most powerful man in the land, when you're the second most powerful man in the land, you speak little, and you speak with authority, and you measure your words carefully. You don't continue heckling like in the opposition. You don't continue complaining. What are you complaining about? All the power is with you. You see, when you're in power, you should look like you're in power. And indeed, everything changes so that now your concern is remaining in power, remaining in control. Now, don't get me wrong. In politics anywhere in the world, ukicheza, you'll find yourself very quickly out of power. Ask a few British prime ministers. You play your politics wrong, you read the mood on the ground wrong, and suddenly there is breaking news. Prime Minister resigns. I'm talking about the UK. Prime Minister forced out. Folks, this is politics. And politics is the same anywhere in the world. So if you've suddenly changed your circumstances from being in the opposition, always criticizing, always heckling, always saying this and that should be done like this, like that, and then suddenly you have the power, you must change completely. You must change and start telling people what to do. You must start building alliances urgently. You must start getting people on your side so that you're able to accomplish what you want to accomplish. You do not want a situation where you're constantly putting out fires, political fires, so much so that you don't have time to do anything else. From this crisis, you said this, and there was this reaction, and people are complaining, and you're sorting that out. Meanwhile, you're saying something else that will get you into trouble tomorrow, politically. No, it's not done like that. But by far the most fascinating thing here is the new political scenario. Indeed, in my opinion, it is a very scary political situation that the country is in right now. Let us start by identifying the major political forces at play in our country at the moment. We have the government. Then we have the Azimio juggernaut, political juggernaut. Very influential because of their numbers and because of the enigma, Raila Odinga. And then we have the third force, political force, wenye Kenya, wenye inchi, not wananchi. Of course, I'm talking about the billionaires of the Mount Kenya region. When you clearly identify these three political forces, the shakers and the movers, if you like, then things which are unfolding on our political scene currently all make perfect sense. Now, the latest development is that wenye Kenya have all closed ranks. They've circled the wagons. But the most interesting development in this force, in this group, is that it is very sharply divided now. Because some of the heavyweights in the country are gravitating towards the government. while others have moved closer, to the Mount Kenya faction, waiting for direction. Now, we've all heard the saying that making a fortune is not as difficult as retaining it, maintaining it, so that you can grow it. And so, while it is very easy for you to come out and say, some of the richest billionaires in Kenya hawakwenda shule, their schooling is sketchy, and therefore you assume these people are not thinkers. But you'd be making a mistake, because these people are not where they are today because they were naive or they are naive. No! These people can see very far. Indeed, they survive or they crumble by being able to predict the future. That's really what it is. Let me cut to the chase and take you back a little. Many Kenyans were taken aback, including our brethren from the Mount Kenya region, when the billionaires of the Mount Kenya region lined up to firmly support Raila Amolo Odinga. Now, what most people did not realize is that these multi-billionaires did not make that move because they love Raila Odinga. No! Their main driving force and the reason why they did what they did was perfectly captured in a speech made by a man called Cyrus Njirongo, which I covered on this channel. I'll put a link in the description area below so that you hear it from the horse's mouth. The reason was that this Wazito wa Kenya were terrified of the possibility of getting a government headed by Dr. William Samoei Ruto. That's what really scared them. And that's what really motivated them to move with speed to rally behind Raila Odinga. That's really what it is. And you can be sure that some of these billionaires had already committed millions, maybe even billions, to their plans. And they were very sure that those plans were based on a Raila Odinga government. Those plans were firmly anchored on an Azimio government, not a UDA government or Kenya Kwanza. I believe we can now begin to understand why this group of very influential Kenyans, very powerful Kenyans, the movers and shakers of money in Kenya, the movers and shakers of our economy, are in a crisis, a very serious crisis. And so the Kenya shillings 1 million question is, what will they do? What will they do next? Well, let's go back to history to get an answer. Because, surprise, surprise, this has happened before in our dear motherland. Oh yes! In 1963, as the government of Mzee Jomo Kenyatta was settling in, the KANU government, the Wazito of Kenya at the time were the European settlers, the Dalameres, etc., etc. Now these people had all placed their bets on KADU winning the elections. The Kenya Africa Democratic Union, that had people like Daniel Toroitich arap Moi, Masinde Muliro, Ronald Ngala, etc., etc. and KADU were pushing for Majimboism, where the new Kenya would have a weak central government and strong regional governments. The Wazito wa Kenya saw that as the only way for them to survive the political change in the country and for their businesses and enterprises to survive. But what happened? KANU swept into power, and the government of Jomo Kenyatta quite rightly identified this group immediately as a threat to their remaining in power, as a threat to national security. So what did they do? Well, as we used to say in the old days, money talks. And so a deliberate effort was made to ensure that those close to the KANU government, those surrounding the government, and some of those within the government got rich as quickly as possible, so that they could match the financial clout and influence of this what was Zito wa Kenya, most of them were Zungus, who they saw as a threat to the government. And of course you can guess, that was a wide open door, which sank the country called Kenya into the cancer of corruption in government. Let me spell it out bluntly. Corruption then was seen as a patriotic move, to gain full financial independence of the country called Kenya from the colonial yoke. And the way to do this was to get rich as quickly as possible on government tenders, on percentage ownership of companies that decided to invest in Kenya, foreign companies. That is how these powerful cartels that still control our politics, our government, were born. The root of corruption and cartels in Kenya is very deep. It is right in the foundation of our country. You know, to remove something from a foundation is impossible unless you bring down the whole building. How can you uproot something from the foundation? Very difficult. And again it happened in 1978 when Mzee Jomo Kenyatta passed on and his vice president, Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, took over the presidency of the country. Those surrounding Moi had no illusions. They knew that there were some very powerful forces that were a threat to the government of Moi. The very same people who had gotten super rich to protect the Jomo Kenyatta presidency. These were the people they were up against. And that is why people like the late Nicholas Kipiator Biwott became multi-billionaires overnight. I mean, when Moi was taking the oath of office for the first time, Biwott had nothing. He was an ordinary Kenyan. He had zilch. He owned nothing. But within a few short years, and the rest is history. Now fast forward to the present. What will happen next? What will the government of Dr. William Ruto do to survive? Are there any clues? Any telltale signs of what they're going to do? Or what any of the other players, the major players, are going to do? Actually, there is plenty. Let's look at them so that we understand this a little better, and so that we can also predict the future accurately. There was a very interesting comment by the Wazito of Mount Kenya recently. They said, "We have not seen any efforts by the new government of Dr. William Ruto to bring Kenyans together." Yeah, of course, after a very divisive presidential election and general election. The response of the government, very, very instructive. They ignored it. They just ignored it. Hawajasema kitu, and I doubt whether they'll say anything. Maybe I may have missed it, but have you seen any effort, any comment, any suggestion by the Kenya Kwanza government to bring Kenyans together, to heal the wounds of the elections? And by the way, telling people to accept and move on is not an effort in bringing the country back together. It isn't. Instead, we're getting something very worrying from the government. The campaign period is over, but those in government are still obsessed. They're still constantly talking about, not Raila Odinga, former President Uhuru Kenyatta. What? Why? Or we're going to form a commission to investigate state capture during the Uhuru presidency? Or we're going to hold President Uhuru Kenyatta responsible for this and that? What's going on? And remember, the Wazito wa Kenya are fully behind former President Uhuru Kenyatta. They're fully backing him. They lined up almost to a man behind former President Uhuru Kenyatta for Azimio and for Raila Odinga. Don't forget that. Now, those of us who are old enough know that going after a former president for whatever reason when in power is never a good idea, because it can never end well. Because President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga have the full backing of the vast majority of Kenyans. That's the political reality. Now let's go in a little deeper into the workings of the Kenya Kwanza government and the workings especially of our new president, Dr. William Ruto. During the campaigns, it was very easy to rubbish UDA, especially because of some of their main spokespersons. People like Oscar Sudi, who are notorious for talking fast and then figuring out what they said later. Oh yes. And therefore it was easy to underestimate UDA and William Ruto, because it is now emerging and it's becoming clearer by the day that President William Ruto had a plan. President Ruto had a plan right from the beginning. And this plan is both political, but it also touches on the economy. And that plan, believe it or not, is the bottoms-up economic strategy. Now, in the heat of the campaigns, we all made a lot of fun of the bottoms-up economic initiative. And many of those jokes were very funny. But the truth is, there is a clever strategy here that will solve many political problems for the president. Actually, what the UDA government wants to do is something that has never been done before in Kenya. And that is to inject serious funds right down there at the bottom, of less privileged Kenyans, of micro businesses, vibandas, small-scale farmers, etc., etc. And if this works, and by that it has a huge chance of working like magic, if this works, then it'll give President Ruto a huge, humongous political advantage and indeed political clout. But let me back up a little so that we understand what we're talking about here. How are these funds going to be distributed? How are these funds going to be injected into the economy? How? Well, at the heart of this plan is something called collectives, or collective farming. This is where a group of farmers run their business like one enterprise. And all these are small farmers with small farms, farming something. And they're all farming something usually in common. The best example of this is the KTDA, the Kenya Tea Development Agency, whose foundation to this day is still the small-scale tea farmer. Now, this is how it works. All a farmer has to do, instead of worrying about where they're going to get money to buy fertilizer, where they're going to get money to buy inputs, all that a farmer does is to go to the collective center, the center of that farm collective, and collect his fertilizer, collect all the inputs they need. The cost of those inputs, borrowed, plus interest, will be recovered. So when they're paid less what they have taken. Very simple, and it works. And so the farmer does not even feel the weight of a loan, which if they borrowed from the market, they'd pay huge interest to start with. And this is why, over the decades, Kenya has remained a major tea producer in the world. That is the secret: collective farming. Now, the bottoms-up initiative intends to replicate this right across the economy as far as possible, including micro businesses. And of course, the man behind all this, the think tank, if you like, is a well-known Kenyan, an economist, a world-renowned economist, David Ndii. The ordinary Kenyan is very much disadvantaged when it comes to borrowing funds for anything. And in a recent interview, Dr. David Ndii gave the perfect example. He said the moneyed Kenyans would go to a bank and pay a minimal interest rate compared to the vast majority of Kenyans who borrow money through their phone using a service like, for instance, Fuliza. Now, the interest on Fuliza, wait for this one, is 1,800% per annum. Of course, it's 6% per day, but that's what it works out to in a year, compared to the bank rates, which are double-digit figures. And you see, there are millions of Kenyans, as is to be expected, in the bottom part of our economy. And if this part gets moving, is accessible to funds, because Kenyans are hard workers, Kenyans are enterprising, the impact on our economy would be phenomenal. So how does this impact politics, I hear you ask? Remember an African president called Muammar Gaddafi, who was the president of Libya? The West huffed and puffed. We all complained he was a brutal dictator. But meanwhile on the ground, Gaddafi's policies were focused on benefiting the ordinary Libyan. And so Libyans were prosperous. Libyans were happy. A vast majority of them, especially those on the bottom end of the economy. And so it was impossible to remove Gaddafi politically. He had massive support. That is the strategy of President Ruto. And it is a strategy that is very viable. As to whether it works or not, time will tell. But there's a good chance of it working. And indeed, the timing is perfect. And what about Azimio? Well, the Azimio strategy right now is very clear. The other day, Chief Justice Martha Koome was supposed to attend an orientation session for legislators. And Azimio members of parliament threatened that they would walk out if she came to the function. And she cancelled at the last minute and sent somebody else. The leader of Azimio, Raila Odinga, has also been mentioning the judgment of the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice a lot. It is rather obvious that the Chief Justice is at the crosshairs of Raila Odinga and his immediate battles, political battles. And Azimio have the numbers on the ground. Of that there is no doubt. Azimio have the enigma factor, the Raila Odinga factor. And therefore, it is easy to predict what is going to happen. Yeah. In fact, getting to the bottom of what happened at the Supreme Court on September 5th this year is going to unravel sooner than anyone thinks. Yeah, getting to the real truth of what really happened, so that all the judges unanimously agreed on throwing out Raila Odinga's petition. You know, the wounds that most Kenyans got as a result of the events surrounding the presidential elections, that we've just come out of, are serious. I have a close friend, a big supporter of this channel. I call her my mother, a senior citizen, who has now been hospitalized. And you can be sure what she's suffering from is as a result of the stress and the heartbreak of what happened over presidential elections. This thing was serious. There are some Kenyans who are no longer with us on this earth, whose demise can be linked to the stress and the heartbreak of our elections. This thing was serious. But as we continue to heal, because we must heal, because life must continue, it is important to keep a close watch on what is happening in our politics. And I pray that God Almighty will strengthen me, give me insight, give me direction, so that I can keep all of you, my precious subscribers, ahead of the game, so that we understand on this channel exactly what is unfolding on our local political scene. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.